there. Before we dive in, just a quick favour to ask. If you're enjoying the show, don't be shellfish. Please take a moment to rate and review it wherever you're listening. It helps more people find us in the big blue ocean of podcasts. You can also support us by hitting that follow or subscribe button, following us on Instagram at Word on the Reef Podcast, and sharing the podcast link with a friend who might love it too. And if you'd like to help keep us afloat, please consider becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month over at patreon.com/wordonthereefpodcast. You'll get a shout out on the show, and your support helps cover the behind the scenes costs like hosting, editing software, and more. Thanks so much. Now let's get into today's episode. You're listening to Word on the Reef, diving into marine science on the Great Barrier Reef and beyond, with Tanya Murphy and Goodban. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Word on the Reef. I'm your host, diver and conservationist Tanya Murphy, and joining me as always is marine educator and fellow ocean enthusiast Goodban.
Yay, good morning, everybody. Show number 10.
Oh my goodness, that's exciting. We made it to number 10. So today, guys, I want you to picture this. You're strolling along a remote, pristine beach, not a soul in sight. And suddenly, bam, you hit a massive pile of plastic trash. Where on earth did that come from? And more importantly, what can we do about it? Today on the show, we'll be chatting with Heidi Tait, founder and CEO of Tangaroa Blue and the Australian Marine Debris Initiative, to hear how they're tackling this tide of rubbish head on. But first, a quick wrap of the federal election, which happened last Saturday. And for our overseas listeners or anyone who's been living under a coral bombie, here's what went down. In a landslide win, Australians re-elected Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the centre-left Labor Party. Meanwhile, Peter Dutton and the Conservative Liberal National Coalition got absolutely hammered.
Oh, did he what?
So much so that Dutton even lost his own seat. That means the opposition needs to find a new leader. Now, here at Word on the Reef, we don't back political parties. We back science and solid climate policy. And on that score, Labor's win is a positive step. Their climate and environmental policies aren't perfect, but they're miles ahead of what the coalition was offering. Brett, how do you think the fish are feeling about this result?
Well, they seem to have a little bit more of a pep in their step when I turned up in the morning. I mean, Chang's thought is now we have to make sure that we hold them accountable. So keep the pressure on, make sure that they do the right thing.
Yeah, I can just imagine Chang's giving some serious side-eye to...
Oh, it's the first time I'd ever seen him smile, so that was a bonus.
I love how you referred to fish as having a spring in their step. I mean, maybe Trevor the Sea Star might be capable of stepping with his 5 legs.
Yeah, well, he was doing some yoga that morning, so I think he was a bit more relaxed than normal, so that's cool.
So what does all this mean for our reef? Well, according to the Australian Conservation Foundation, Labor is heading in a better direction when it comes to clean energy and cutting emissions. They've scored points for investing in clean manufacturing and rejecting the coalition's risky nuclear power push. But, and it's a big but, they're still approving new coal and gas projects. Australia is the world's second largest coal exporter, and if we're serious about saving the reef, that has to change. We need to phase out fossil fuels and ramp up responsibly placed renewables. And let's not forget nature protection. Labor came into power in 2022 promising stronger environmental laws, but they ended the term by fast-tracking a bill that weakened them. Right now, our ecosystems are legally less protected than they were at the start of their term. So yes, there's still a mountain of advocacy work ahead, but at least we didn't end up with a government planning to turbocharge gas and slash environmental safeguards. Yeah. Let's be real, Peter Dutton said in a live debate that he didn't know whether climate change is having an impact. He's been dubbed Timu Trump for a good reason. His policies leaned hard to the far right and many Australians weren't buying it. In the end, the coalition got trounced, and that sends a strong message. Australians care about climate and the environment, and young voters in particular are demanding action.
Yes.
So while the hard work continues, this election result is a win for the climate, for clean energy and for the reef. But now, it's time to go on a little adventure. If you're in a safe place to do so, I want you to close your eyes and imagine you're on a remote beach on the Cape York Peninsula, hundreds of kilometres away from the nearest city. Walking on the white sand, you can see schools of fish and guitar sharks cruising in the shallow waters. This landscape has been sacred to the local traditional owners for tens of thousands of years. Everything appears untouched by civilization and time, and all you can hear is the wind and waves and birds. But there is something not quite right about this beach. As you walk further, you come across a mountain of plastic trash. Ropes, nets, floats, fragments of plastic bottles and toys and shoes, stretching as far as the eye can see. How did all this trash get here? And what can we do about it? To help us understand, we're joined by Heidi Tait, founder and CEO of the Tangaroa Blue Foundation. Heidi's love for the ocean comes from 20 years as a scuba diving instructor. In 2004, Heidi co-founded the Tangaroa Blue Foundation and the Australian Marine Debris Initiative as a way of not only removing the ever-increasing loads of rubbish in our oceans, but more importantly, finding ways that prevent marine debris from being released in the first place. Heidi was named one of the 18 most influential women in ocean conservation in the July 2018 edition of Ocean Geographic. So without further ado, good morning, Heidi. How are you?
Good morning, Tanya. Doing very well, thank you.
Good morning, Heidi. Welcome.
Morning, Brett.
Great to have you on the show, and thanks for joining us here on our imaginary journey to Cape York. I want to start by getting to know you a bit better. You grew up in Sydney. When did you discover your passion for the underwater world?
Well, I guess I always had a connection to nature. I was lucky enough to grow up when I was very young across the beach, and then we moved to an area in kind of northwestern Sydney that had a state forest right across the road. So I spent a lot of my youth running around in the bush and just really enjoyed being connected to nature and had some of those experiences very early on where you kind of feel very at peace when you're surrounded by nature. And I think that's where it kind of all started.
Well, I think we can all relate to that, at least.
Yes, there's that same old saying, isn't it, that all the guests that we've had, you get that first connection and it goes through your veins and it's part of you, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. I think it makes you respect, but it also makes you know that is an environment that can make you feel much better as well.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, and when I walk on my favourite beaches like Fitzroy Island, Palm Cove or Green Island around Cairns, they're actually quite pristine and you don't see that much trash, probably because the resorts keep them clean. So a lot of people probably don't realise that this is such a big problem. At what point did you find out, Heidi, that our remote beaches were covered in trash, and how did you come to be concerned about that?
It was back in, I think, 2011, and I was lucky enough to be invited by the staff members from the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority from the Cairns office, who were doing one of their far north trips, and they had worked with us a little bit with the schools on marine debris prior to that, and they had a seat in the car to go up to do a trip to the Cape, and that's when I first got introduced to what Cape York beaches look like, and it was quite soul-destroying when you saw areas of the country that you had assumed were really clean because they didn't really have a lot of population around them, when in fact they were some of the most impacted parts of Australia.
Yeah, it's pretty bad up there, isn't it? Do you think that that's got anything to... Like, we've got the EAC that runs down the coastline there, that massive current at about 6 knots, because we have a big issue at the moment with ghost net with our turtles in that part of the world as well. Do you think that that's being drawn down from anybody, or do you think it's us?
Oh, look, what we've tried to do is when we collect data for the Australian Marine Debris Initiative database, which we do for all our cleanups around the country, one of the things we're trying to identify is the source of debris, because that will help us identify, which stakeholders you need at the table so you can start to work out solutions. And so we record things like barcodes and brands, and it gives us an idea of whether we're dealing with a true marine debris, offshore source issue, or whether we're dealing with local litter.
Right.
And when we look at beaches like, around Cairns, we may get a 70% local litter issue. But once we start to get up to Cape York, we're looking at 90% plus that's coming from offshore sources.
Wow.
And so some of that debris is definitely coming from the north, from that current.
Yep.
There also is a current that comes from the South Pacific Islands. So we do find a lot of debris from about Lockhart River north that comes across from, Fiji, New Zealand, Solomon Islands, Samoa. And then we also have those massive cargo ships and international fishing vessels that contribute. So it's not just one place. Some of it's ours, but in those remote areas, most of it's not.
Yeah. So dealing with all those multiple sources is something that you've been involved with, including, international negotiations in the UN Global Plastics Treaty to try and see if those other countries can do their part as well. And I know you've also been involved with multiple different projects in Australia so we can clean up our own act. Now, Heidi, before we get deeper into all the different initiatives you have to clean up marine debris, I want to quickly circle back because we talked a little bit about your, origins in Sydney, and I just know that you had like a really interesting story, which, how did you come to discover dive instructing and spending so much of your life as a dive instructor? I mean, I know it went via working on the ski fields of Austria, which is really interesting.
Yeah, complete opposite.
Yeah, it's a bit of a detour or a bit of a journey to get there. But I was someone that always wanted to go travelling. And as soon as I finished high school, I actually went to uni for 6 months and realised that wasn't for me and decided to defer and jumped in a bus and travelled around Australia for a couple of years and then ended up in the snowy mountains and then decided to go across to Europe and lived 6 years in Austria and worked in some amazing places with snowboarding back when snowboarding had really only just started. So it was really exciting to be part of a kind of a new sport. And as part of that, I had an amazing opportunity to discover the mountains and the snow, but then went on holiday to Thailand and needed a bit of a break and ended up just staying there for 3 years and became a diving instructor. And my whole life flipped from being a mountain person to being an ocean person.
Yeah, she'll do that.
And then, from there I just kept teaching and had the opportunity to teach diving in, lots of places around the world and ended up in Port Douglas and Margaret River in Australia. And in Margaret River was actually where I started Tangaroa Blue, and then a few years later moved up to Port Douglas and kind of brought that across with us.
Wow. Well, I think I've had a pretty interesting life. Both of us have, but I am feeling a little bit jealous.
Yeah, I've just been around the world just then.
Yeah.
That was great.
I think a few parents out there might be annoyed with us right now because any young people listening are going to be like, see, I don't need to finish university.
Yeah.
I can just go and travel the world and I'll end up as successful as Heidi or, influential. So there's different ways to skin the cat of life, I suppose.
There is, and I think that every step that you make takes you on to where you're eventually going to go, and you can't necessarily fast track that because then you don't necessarily learn the skills or the knowledge that you need to be where you're going to be eventually as well. And I could never have dreamed of what I'm doing now back then, but every single experience is one that I needed to be able to do that.
Oh, that is I wish I could bottle what you just said, because that is exactly what every parent needs to say to their teenage kids. Don't rush it. You're not going to get it all at once. You have to work for it. It'll come.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
Yep, it absolutely is. I heard an amazing comment, not about asking someone what they want to do for the rest of their life, but asking what they want to do next.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at you go. Love it.
Yeah, we're here for marine cleanups and life inspiration today. Yeah. So, Heidi, you were inspired by seeing the trash in your first trip to Cape York to do something about it. And then what were sort of the next steps that led you to founding Tangaroa Blue, and what was its mission?
Yeah, so in 2004 was actually Margaret River, and I was teaching diving there, managing a little dive shop in Dunsborough and spending a lot of time in the national park, the Cape Leeuwin Naturalist National Park. And I couldn't believe all the rubbish that I was finding washed up in a national park. But what I really identified was the different types of rubbish. So there were beer bottles and ciggy butts that, people watching the sunset over the Indian Ocean potentially could have left. There was stuff coming from the commercial fishing industry, and there was a lot of stuff with international writing on it. Mm-hmm. So my question was, where is this stuff coming from? It's clearly not all coming from the same place. And what needs to happen to prevent that in the future? So I actually held a first clean-up where we had 100 people over the weekend go to 30 different beaches. We all collected data on what we picked up, and then a couple of weeks later we held a workshop to have a look at that data and to pick one item that we thought that we could do something about. And so that was kind of the framework of the Australian Marine Debris Initiative getting developed. It was not just about cleaning, because if all you do is clean up, that's all you'll ever do. It was about how do you use that data that you got from the clean-up to be evidence to push for change. And so that's the model that we used. And, it did take us 6 years, but in 2011 we were able to get legislative change in Western Australia where the strapping bands that goes around boxes,
Yeah. Yep.
It's actually now banned on all recreational and commercial fishing vessels in WA. And so that was a result
Wow.
of that first berry cleanup and that first analysis of data.
Wow, so that was
able
one
to
of the
show
biggest things you were finding was the strapping
Yeah.
tape. Yep.
Yeah, and also being understanding which ones were coming from a local source that we could potentially do something about.
Right.
And so that was because we had a commercial fisherman actually at the workshop, and he was able to say, oh, this one and this one, they're used in the rock lobster industry, and they tell us what kind of bait's in the box. So we were able to then use that to try and start developing a solution, which we were able to do.
Yeah, well, it's in their best interest, isn't it, to make sure that the industry that they're in, if they're doing it properly, is going to be there for a long time rather than being tangled up in plastic and garbage. But I'm just having a quick look, just for our listeners, to give people a little bit of an idea of the amazing work that you do. I've taken a screenshot of your data on here, and I'm just blown away. So just to rattle off a few for people to understand, it's saying you've got 269,000 volunteers.
Over the years.
Yeah, over the years. Now, if you're looking at 2 tonnes of rubbish removed.
The 2 tonnes is what's been submitted into the Australian Marine Debris Initiative database.
Yeah, right.
So it's a cumulative total from the beginning. But when you look at, as to your point, is that more than 75% of that rubbish is plastic.
Yep.
And plastic doesn't weigh a lot. So then you start to look at the volume of that debris, and that's when you start to get quite mind-boggled.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was like 28 million items removed.
Yeah, and that's the key. If you think about 28 million items, actually that's someone picking up 28 million items and then going through and counting it and auditing it as well. And that shows the really big effort. And, without that data, we wouldn't be able to be pushing for change because we'd just be standing there going, there's so much rubbish, what should we do about it? Well, we can tell you exactly what that rubbish is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sorry, I missed that. How much trash exactly? Off the top of your head, how much trash have you cleared off Australia's beaches in the life of the organisation?
Yeah, it's 28,331,755 individual items.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. It's just, and 1.5 million volunteer hours and 41,000 clean-up drives.
Wow.
It's incredible.
It's crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I think that the big thing with those numbers is that this is not just Tangaroa Blue clean-up events. This is a whole country worth of partners. So local coast care groups, Indigenous ranger teams, corporate groups, schools, like all these partners and individuals that are out there looking after their patch, and they are all contributing data using the same methodology into the one database to really, value that cleanup activity into the future, because we know that the next tide will bring more stuff. So the short-term impacts of the cleanup, can be a little bit heartbreaking when you know that it's always washing up, but you know that data that you collected can be used again and again and again to not only push for change, but also to measure the impact of things that have changed to make sure they are doing what they should do.
Yeah.
Amazing. I want to briefly talk about the name, Tangaroa Blue. What's the story behind the name of the organisation?
So Tangaroa is the Maori and the Polynesian god of the ocean, and one of his laws are, if you look after me, I'll look after you. And when we were in Margaret River, we were surrounded by divers, fishers, surfers, beach lovers. We were also had a pretty strong influence from New Zealand, and we really wanted to show that people that use the ocean for either, their work or their pleasure had a way to give back. Mm-hmm. And so we actually had approval from a Kamatua, who's a Maori elder, that we could use the name, and had a Maori artist design our logo as well. So we really wanted to show that cultural respect, but it really aligns so much with what we were trying to do. And I think that it gives, a good thing to follow for people that love being in the water.
Beautiful.
What a great story. That's so cool.
Let's talk about the impacts of this marine debris. Is there any way of measuring how big the impact of all the marine debris in Australia's beaches is? What is its impact on marine life, animals, and the ocean, and I guess ultimately humans as well?
Well, I think, and this is kind of a little bit of the problem as to why we've been so slow as a country to address this issue, is that primarily we were talking about the impact around wildlife. And so we were looking at turtles and dugongs particularly were associated or linked to the funding that was available to address this issue. And so we know that the ingestion of wildlife is a really big issue with marine debris, and also the entanglement. And the smaller an item gets, and we know that marine debris continually breaks up into smaller and smaller pieces, the smaller it gets, the more different types of species can ingest it, including corals now, we know can ingest microplastics. So, a lot of that was the focus of the funding and the impacts. But we also know that there are a lot of other impacts. And that can be from vessel safety. If you have something big floating after the floods down south, floating through the shipping lane, vessels can hit it or get rope or net kind of like wrapped around the prop. So there's a safety issue there. We know that tourists don't want to go and lie on a beach that's full of rubbish or swim in an ocean that's full of rubbish. And there's an economic impact as well. But the thing that we think is going to be the big game changer is when the science can connect the actual impact that it has to human health. And we know that microplastics are in our water, they're in our air, they're in our soil, they're in our food. But we haven't had enough time to know exactly what that is going to do to human health. We do know that a lot of chemicals in plastics are endocrine disruptors, which means they can affect fertility. And I think it will be ironic that if we find in 40 or 50 years' time that the human race has a problem with reproducing because of the chemicals in our body because we couldn't deal with the waste that we were creating as a society.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, well, there is a bit of a fertility epidemic at the moment. 1 in 3 babies is born through assisted IVF and whatnot. Not a medical doctor, though, but definitely doesn't help if we're ingesting fish that have eaten microplastics that are full of endocrine disruptors, I suppose. So let's talk about the beach cleanups a bit more closely, because some people might be interested in how they can get involved. And I know here on the Great Barrier Reef, you run regular beach cleanups under your Reef Clean program. And it actually sounds like a really cool experience because the volunteers get transport and food, I believe. Is that right, Heidi?
Yeah. So we kind of feel like we've got to feed volunteers and get them to the places that we really need that help in cleaning up to keep them all going. So we do run a number of cleanups that are remote as part of Reef Clean. And Reef Clean is a really exciting program. It's been funded by Reef Trust. Now we're in our 6th year, which is great, and it gives us the opportunity to really work with communities on identifying those hotspots. So during the dry season, we head up to the Cape 6 times. We take a group of volunteers. It takes us a couple of days to drive up to the site in 4-wheel drives. We camp and we clean up with the local communities and the Indigenous ranger teams at locations. We also do auditing, so we have that data collection, and then we work with them on the best way for recycling and disposing of the debris that's removed as well. And then it's another couple of days to drive home. So they can be up to 9 days in total, and they give people an amazing opportunity to explore Cape York and give back while they're up there as well.
Our guest today is Heidi Tait, founder and CEO of Tangaroa Blue Foundation. Now, we've been talking a lot today about their amazing work with all the trash that they've picked up off beaches all across Australia. It's a national beach cleanup organisation, but they also work on source reduction initiatives aimed at stopping trash at the source. And it turns out one of the biggest sources of marine debris is fishing waste, such as ghost nets. Heidi, what are ghost nets?
The ghost nets are fishing nets that have escaped from the fishing fleet or the fishing vessel that's using it, but they're drifting around the ocean still fishing regardless. And that's why they're called ghost nets, because they're ghost fishing.
Yeah.
The problem with ghost nets is that anything that would normally get caught in a net still gets caught in a net, but there's nobody there to supervise it, and so therefore unintended catch or bycatch can be particularly impactful, especially things like whales, dolphins, sharks, turtles. They just can't get out of the net.
Yeah.
So thousands of animals can continually die if they get caught into those nets.
Yeah, I've had a pretty close experience with that because I work alongside the Cairns Turtle Rehab Centre through work at the Cairns Aquarium, and we've had quite a number of turtles come through with really severe injuries from those things, and it's resulted in flipper removal, amputations. It's just dreadful,
Wow.
the damage that they do. So I see it firsthand, and I educate my customers doing tours at the hospital every day about the impacts of ghost net and looking after the environment. So, yeah, I know that's nasty stuff.
Wow, it sounds like a big problem. How
Yeah.
often does this happen? Because I bet commercial fishing operations don't want to lose their nets. They need them. So how is this happening so often, and how often is it happening, Heidi?
Yeah, there's different types of ghost gear, and so you find different things in different regions. So in the Gulf of Carpentaria particularly, you find a lot of nets, and there was significant illegal fishing in the Arafura Sea, which is just south of Indonesia. And the way that currents work is that it flows into the Gulf of Carpentaria. it hits the area north of Weipa around Marpoon first, and then it circles around and then hits the other side of the Gulf up near Gove and Nhulunbuy. And so those areas significantly get a lot of ghost nets washing up. In other areas, like on the east coast along the Great Barrier Reef, we do get nets that are coming through the reef from the Pacific, but we tend to find things like FADs, which are fish aggregating devices that can have buoys or GPS trackers on them as well, come through. So it really depends what type of fishing is happening in the area to what type of ghost gear or ghost nets you might find.
Speaking of GPS trackers, when boats are out and around, like tourism or fishing vessels, and if they see a huge ghost net floating around and they want to do something about it, but they might not be able to pick it up or have space to put it on board their boat. So I understand you've come up with a way for people to tag ghost nets so that other dedicated retrieval teams can go and pick them up later. Have I understood that project correctly?
Yeah, it's called Project Recon. So we were finding a lot of these GPS trackers during our beach cleanups, particularly in Cape York, and they looked like a pretty cool piece of tech, and we wanted to know how we could reuse them or at least recycle them. We were really struggling to find a way to divert them from landfill, and we were able to get hold of one of the manufacturers called Satlink. So they're an international company based in Spain that actually produce a type of these trackers. And we've set up a project together. So if we find one of their trackers, they now have more than 100 international fishing vessels that have signed up to the program.
Wow.
To say that Tangaroa Blue can take ownership of that tracker and have it reassigned to us. So we go through some testing to make sure it's structurally sound and that the IT and the GPS satellite technology is still operational, because some of these trackers might have been sitting around in the water for a really long time without being used. And if it's all ready to go, then we kind of refurbish it with new rope and a tag on it, and we can distribute them to our partners. So anybody that works out on the open ocean or out on the reef, they can host one of these trackers on their vessels, and if they come across a ghost net that they're unable to retrieve at the time because it's too big, they can immediately attach a tracker. They let us know that it's been deployed and we switch on the satellite. And it means we can keep an eye on it until a vessel that's big enough is able to come and retrieve it.
Wow.
So one of the things that was happening was people coming back and reporting the nets, but by the time someone got out there to go pick it up, they couldn't find it anymore because it had moved.
Yeah.
So this really, really enables us to keep it under surveillance. The other really cool thing with the tech is that we can put up a virtual fence. So if we know that the trajectory looks like it's either going into the shipping lane or into an area where there's a sensitive reef, we can get notifications a lot quicker and a lot faster, and we can know that retrieval can be escalated, or that vessels in the area can be notified that there may be a large floating object in a shipping lane.
Oh, I tell you what, I'm just so happy with that. I didn't know that you guys could do that. That's and I hope that our listeners out there who are listening to this can see that, as we said, it's more than just picking up trash, isn't it? It's about holding people accountable and actually proactive work. That's such a great idea.
Yeah,
it's working really well. And I think we've removed about 6 tonne of ghost gear so far with the trackers being deployed.
Yeah.
And so anybody that finds a tracker that wants to donate it, they can just let us know and we can pick it up, and we can recycle the ones as well now that we are unable to use if they're not operational. And of course, if anybody wants to host one on their vessel, it just needs to sit in the sun because it's got solar panels on it, and it's as easy as just attaching it, and we can do the rest from the back-end database. Any of our listeners out there that have a boat and are out there, either fishing or tourism or anybody, get hold of them and get on board with it.
Absolutely, especially if they're in those ghost net hotspots like up in the Cape. So going down a step from those huge commercial fishing nets, we know that recreational fishing tackle is also commonly lost in the ocean and ends up washing up on beaches. I've got a personal story of that. I came across a sea turtle when I was snorkeling at Fitzroy Island, and it had a tangled ball of fishing line coming out of its rear. So as in it had swallowed it, thinking it was a jellyfish, tentacles probably, and was all blocked up, was having trouble passing it. So I actually managed to grab it and pull until the whole thing came out. But the sad thing is there's probably a lot more out there. So Heidi, tell us about the program you have for recycling fishing tackle. So we have a program called Rig Recycle, and this was born out of the Reef Clean project again, where we were
finding on average about 125 metres of fishing line was being collected in every cleanup activity. So we wanted to work with the recreational fishing industry to find solutions as well. So Rig Recycle enables us to take recreational fishing gear for a reuse, recycle model again. So anything that we recover that can be repurposed or repaired, we do, and then we're able to distribute that to recreational fishing charities like Abled Anglers, for example. And then anything that can't be reused, then we go through a recycling program. And so some of the things we can do is that with fishing line, monofilament fishing line, we can actually granulate that up and use that as a feedstock. So we have some really cool products that we've been able to work with plastic chemists to integrate that material type into. The braid line, we have an amazing network of artists and basket weavers who love the braid line, especially the coloured stuff. Mm-hmm. So we're able to repurpose that. And some of the spools that the fishing line comes on, we're able to use some of the plastic from that into a recycling program as well. So
wow, well done. That's so cool.
I think we're at over 2 million metres of fishing line that's been recovered through the program,
wow.
and over 25,000 fishing line spools that have been recovered. And those are things that would traditionally all go to landfill.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, amazing work. And I know that you have these collection boxes where people can drop off any fishing tackle that is otherwise waste at various fishing shops up and down the coast of Australia and the Great Barrier Reef. I know there's one in Cairns. Where's that located again, Heidi?
Yeah, the Cairns one's at Tackle World in Cairns, and yeah, there's about 100 recreational fishing stores that host them up and down the east coast of Australia.
Amazing. So if you find any lost fishing tackle, make sure you take it in to get recycled. And the next thing that I want to talk about is your program around cigarette butts. And they're, as you mentioned, one of the most common types of litter, which people don't always throw in the bin, and they often throw them on the ground to stub them out. And I think that's because many people don't realise that the cigarette filters are made from plastic, and that will ultimately get washed down the drain and into the ocean, where it can be ingested by marine life. So can you tell us about your campaign to try and reduce people's, flicking their cigarette butts on the ground?
So Ditch the Flick is our cigarette butt litter campaign.
Yeah, I love it.
And it's really about that behaviour change of disposal. So we worked with ex-smokers to help us really understand the barriers around proper disposal. And one of the things that we did find was the majority of people didn't realise that the butts themselves were plastic. And so that's been an educational message that we've discovered. But we also really wanted to work with different types of areas to make it easier to do the right thing. And the first trial that we did was at the Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville. And we worked with them across 6 of their NRL footy games. And we were able to set up designated outdoor smoking areas, directional signage, messaging to the patrons, and reduce cigarette butt litter around the events or around the games by 71% in those first 6 games. So a massive decrease.
Yeah.
Wow.
So well received, and all the things that we were able to implement have now been integrated in day-to-day operations at the stadium. So it's not about running a project, the project finishes and things go back to normal. It's about how do we integrate those learnings into day-to-day operations so you get that long-term impact.
And I think that people now, with the smoking rate declining, which is obviously going to be a bonus to the environment as well, you see a less of those cigarette butts around the city and little places like that. But I think people are really, really noticing anyone that does flick one out the window. Like I saw this little old lady at the traffic lights the other day that was absolutely giving this guy a serve in the car next to her. And this dude was huge. She was tiny. And she's into him for flicking his cigarette butt out the window. He actually pulled over and grabbed the cigarette butt and put it back in his car because this little old lady wanted to go him.
Go, Grandma.
Oh, she was on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Education is a big thing.
Yep.
I participated in a cigarette butt clean-up in Cairns within the last couple of years, and there was still a lot, especially outside the bar and pub areas. So I think if those pubs and bars could get involved and put a bit more signage and education, they could really make a big difference.
Yeah, well, I know in Japan, even as much as 5 or 6 years ago, that if you were caught smoking in the street, if you didn't have a way of showing where you were going to put that cigarette butt, they fined you. So they actually fined you for not proving where you were going to put it when you'd finished with it. And people would have to carry around these little ashtrays in their pocket in fear of getting an on-the-spot fine from the smoking police. They had this big no smoking thing on their shoulder. It's incredible.
Wow, that's one way of dealing with it.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Hopefully all the listeners out there who smoke have now recognised that cigarette butts contain plastic.
Yes,
and
they're not
put them
cool.
in the bin. So let's move on to balloons. Balloon releases are another big problem. A lot of people release helium balloons or just having helium balloons at a party and them ending up flying away. What goes up must come down and they end up as debris. So, Heidi, why are balloons so bad for the ocean and what can we do to stop them?
So balloons, yeah, another one. We work with a really cool community group called No Balloon Release Australia, and they've been an AMD partner for so long, but they've been really working with each of the state governments to try and not only get balloon releases banned, but also regulate the use of helium, which is a finite resource, and what do we use it for?
Yeah, we've only got about
so they float away.
200 years worth of helium supplies left on the Earth, which sounds like a long time, but our great-grandchildren aren't going to thank us if they can't use helium for the actual proper purposes because we used it all up in balloons. Sorry, that's just my little rant about helium balloons.
Okay.
Not a fan of helium balloons.
No.
Yeah. So we know that balloons, when they go up, they keep expanding and eventually they burst. And when they burst, they tend to have these little tentacles and they land in water. They look like a jellyfish and they can be ingested by wildlife very easily. In addition to that, a lot of them have ribbons and plastic clips and so forth. And, one of our amazing staff members, Dr. Jennifer Lavers, does a lot of work. She's actually out on Lord Howe Island at the moment doing her shearwater research and they have a look at what the shearwaters are ingesting.
It's a type of bird for anyone that doesn't know.
That she finds is just crazy. So the plastics, the ribbons, and the balloon itself. One of the barriers that we've really come across is people thinking that because balloons are made out of rubber, that it's a natural biodegradable material, but that's actually not the case. Even if they were completely natural, they would still take a really extended period of time to degrade in the environment. But most of them have additives in them as well as those my oil balloons, which definitely aren't biodegradable.
Wow. Yeah, sorry, I was just interjecting to say that shearwaters are a type of birds, just in case anyone didn't know. They are ingesting a lot of balloons, as Heidi pointed out. So, yeah, paper decorations at parties are great, I think. Another type of plastic waste, which you have discovered is occurring regularly in Australia, happens even before the plastic products are made. The tiny plastic pellets which companies use to make plastic products out of, it turns out they're often lost into the environment due to spills during transport and storage. So can you tell us about your initiative to deal with this problem, Heidi?
Yeah, so we discovered what a nurdle was probably back in 2007. And
nurdle? Is that what you call it? Yep.
Yeah, that's the common term, although the industry doesn't call it. It's a plastic resin pellet, and it is the raw form of plastic. So if you're going to make a plastic product, you start off with plastic resin pellets, and then you heat or blow mold them into a bottle or a can or a container or a bag or whatever you're going to make. And these products can obviously degrade at end of life, where we see microplastics. But this particular type of microplastic, as you said, is one that hasn't even been made into anything yet. So it looks quite round. It can be a little bit drum, but it's not that fragmented, irregular shape that you would find if it was a bottle, for example, that was fragmenting. So when we did some work around industrial areas, we discovered that there were quite a lot of manufacturing sites that were leaking out these pellets and these nurdles just from day-to-day spills, and they were escaping into the stormwater system. We also discovered there was a program called Operation Clean Sweep that was happening in the US that had the industry aligned on preventing that from occurring. So we were able to get some funding in 2015 to bring that to Australia, and now we have more than 100 factories and businesses that have signed up to take the pledge not to lose any feedstock, so really putting a focus on cleaning. But we also work really closely with the EPA in New South Wales and Victoria and local councils around Australia on compliance responses to those businesses that continually do the wrong thing and have a big pollution problem.
Wow. That's so amazing. You've started with the beach cleanups, you've analysed the stuff that you find, and then from there you've gone back to the sources. You've gone back to where is this stuff coming from and made a real permanent reduction. And I think that's an amazing thing about the Tangaroa Blue Foundation. So what advice do you have for people out there who want to make a difference for the oceans and for the environment?
Look, this is a real citizen science program that anybody can contribute to. We do need good data if we're going to be able to get that change. And so, I know sometimes it takes more time to do the counting and the auditing than it did to do the cleanup itself. But unless we have good science, good robust data, it's really hard to get policy change or industry best practice in place. So the effort is definitely worth it.
Yep.
And so I would say anybody that does a cleanup that wants to contribute, we have the Australian Marine Debris Initiative data collection app that you can download and you contribute. Mm-hmm. You can also join one of our cleanup activities. We have staff in Cairns that are more than happy to train people how to use the data. The data is the key. That's what we need to push for change.
Mm.
I reckon that this has been probably the most positive message that we've had for people to understand that it is, like we said before, more than just picking it up off the beach, that there is so much more being done.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah, like it's just so positive for all of our listeners to know that something is being done. We can fix the problem if we all work together. The work that you're doing is just incredible. Thank you so much on behalf of all the fish.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And thank you to all the volunteers and all our AMBI partners.
Yeah.
This is a collaboration as well. It's not just one organisation, but it's having that platform, that network that we can all collaborate together on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyone out there that if you want to get involved in a beach cleanup or find out more, head to the Tangaroa Blue website. What's the URL, Heidi?
Tangaroablue.org, and we're, of course, on all the social platforms as well.
Awesome. Well, Heidi Tait, founder and CEO of Tangaroa Blue Foundation. It's been amazing chatting with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for letting me come on board.
Thank you, Heidi. It's been amazing. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
And thanks to all of you, our listeners, for joining us on Word on the Reef.
Oh, let's say a very big happy birthday to the most beautiful human being that has ever spoken to the animals. We all know who that is. Sir David Attenborough. Yesterday, 99.
Oh, really?
Yes,
amazing.
And don't forget, his documentary, Oceans, has come out today.
Oh, yes, it is currently in cinemas everywhere.
I challenge anyone to leave that without goosebumps.
That's all for now. Best fishes.
Have a great week, everybody.
See you next time.
Bye.